Welcome back to the post-lunch session of day one of Atal Faculty Development Program on Drug Disposition. Let's begin with the third session of the day. I now invite Dr. Ujjwala Shinde, in charge head, Department of Pharmaceutics at Bombay College of Pharmacy, to invite the speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Deepti. Good afternoon and welcome back all the participants on Atal FDP on drug disposition, an important factor in drug engineering. Drug delivery system, whether they are conventional, novel or targeted, their aim is to maximize therapeutic efficacy and minimize side effects by implementing ADME of API. All approaches, they have their own advantages and disadvantages. Both branded or generic drugs, the achievement of consistent quality and the therapeutic performance using drug delivery system pose many challenges when you want to bring it into the market. With this view, our guest speaker for afternoon session is from industry. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce Dr. Mandar Kaudule, Chairman and CEO, IQgenics Pharma, who is BCP alumni, years of experience in pharmaceutical industry. Looking at its achievement, Dr. Mandar worked with Minister of Trade and Commerce and technical advisor Professor Mashelkar on finalization of draft for Indian Patent Act and its amendments. He is also involved in bagging maximum granted patent awards by Government of India and Pharmaxil for VOCAD for 6 years consecutively and maintain 100% success in US legislation. 108 Most Fabulous Global Healthcare Leader Award he has in his credit by which is delivered by Economics Times Now and World Health and Wellness Congress in Feb 20. He is expert committee member on pharmacy course for expert committee member for this one Rashtriya Uchchatar Shiksha Abhiyan, RUSA, Maharashtra State. Member of various government and non-governmental trade organizations such as FICCI, CII, Pharmaxil, IPA, IDMA, and Continental WHO, WHO. 5 international research publications and 115 patent applications are in his credit. He has been granted 22 patents. With this brief introduction, I will welcome and invite Dr. Mandar to deliver his session on various approaches for overcoming drug metabolism challenges. Welcome, Dr. Mandar.
Thank you, Ujjwala. Thank you, Dr. Gatne, and thank you, Dr. Shirsat, for inviting me, first of all, and giving me this opportunity to speak about challenges in the metabolic processes, which we in industry, you in academia, across the healthcare industry, we are facing on a very regular basis. So, and I hope you all had your lunch and your metabolic processes have already started. And hopefully those processes will involve less complexities as we'll talk about it. So let me start with my presentation. Let me put it across over here. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So what exactly we are going to talk about today is we are going to talk about how any orally administered drug behaves inside the body. So what is the fate of it when you administer any drug orally, whether it is a conventional, whether it is a modified release, tablet or a capsule or a sachet or a liquid or a suspension, lozenge, whatever it is, how it is, what is its fate in the body. The challenges that we normally have in the bioavailability of the drug, when we are talking about bioavailability, we are just restricting it only up to its absorption and availability in the bloodstream. We are not talking about the events that happen afterwards. If you want to see those events that happen afterwards, you're actually looking at AUC. So bioavailability also has 2 or 3 aspects put together. One would be your Cmax or Tmax levels, and also your AUC levels or area under the curve levels, which is dependent on its metabolism and excretion. Then we will talk briefly about what is drug metabolism. Then we will talk about what are the different sites of metabolism in terms of breaking down the drug inside the body. What are the different sites where the drug gets broken down? And then what are the different approaches when we are talking about overcoming those metabolic challenges? So metabolism per se, if you look at only from a perspective of once the drug gets absorbed and then it is broken down into easily dissolvable metabolites which can be excreted easily. I have not restricted the scope of this discussion only up to that point. I have also encompassed some other activities as well into that, which are related to the absorption of the drug, also related to the permeability and other aspects which go hand in hand when you're actually trying to develop any formulation. So coming back to the fate of orally administered drug, we know about ADME, which is absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. But the recent trend is also you have to look at release of the drug from its dosage form. So I have covered liberation also, because that's for a pharmaceutical scientist or from a pharmaceutics person who is developing any dosage form, this is the most important thing, how he is going to liberate the drug from the dosage form, whether it is a tablet, is a capsule or a sachet or a liquid or a suspension. All that affects the liberation time. If your compression time of or compression force on the tablet, the friability of the tablet, opening up of the capsule or dissolving of the capsule in which the drug is put, or the suspension flow properties, everything affects the liberation of the drug and therefore the absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. So what is liberation is actually the release of the drug from the dosage form. That's what is important aspect when you are actually looking at metabolism also. Absorption, again, which means that movement of the drug from your GI tract into your bloodstream. And the absorption, again, within absorption, you have various different sites of absorption. So the absorption can start, for example, right from your oral cavity if you are using a chewable or a buccal or a mucoadhesive kind of buccal tablet, or you are trying orally dispersible product, then the absorption can start right from your oral mucosa. Then it can get into your gastric fluid, stomach. Absorption happens from the stomach also. For many of the drugs, absorption happens through stomach, but if you look at overall number of drugs for which the absorption happens through stomach is very, very less. I would say anywhere between 14 to 25% of the drugs get absorbed from the stomach. Rest, majority of the drug gets absorbed in the intestine. Again, if you look at intestine, there are three different parts of intestine. You have a duodenum, you have jejunum, you have the actual intestinal portion, which is the longest, I would say, in terms of its length. Also, it is supplied highly with enzymes and other things. You have bile and other things getting secreted over there also, which improve the absorption. There are a lot of enzymes that are present within the intestinal fluid, which help digestion initially and then the absorption, breaking down. A lot of things happen in the intestine. So this is almost 60-70% of the drug what we consume are absorbed through the intestine. Quite a few of them gets absorbed in the upper part of intestine, which is called as a duodenum and jejunum. And you need to have a different release mechanism if you are looking at absorption from the upper part of intestine. If you are looking at a lower part of intestine, you need a different release mechanism. If you are looking at absorption from stomach, you're looking at a very different release pattern. So therefore, liberation plays very important role in actually the absorption of the drug. And in colon, certain drugs have a very wide range of absorption. They start getting absorbed right from stomach all the way up to the large intestine, which is colon. Certain drugs actually are not absorbed at all from the colon. Certain drugs, though they get absorbed in the intestine or in the stomach, but you want them for the localized action in the colon, you need a different kind of release mechanism for those drugs which are for the colonic release. So how you want, based on your absorption site, you can modulate the release, and therefore release of the drug becomes very important when you're talking about absorption. Once the drug gets absorbed, it gets distributed throughout the body, through the bloodstream. It also passes through from, if you are absorbing it from the GI tract, normally it goes into the liver first. That's what we call it as a first pass liver mechanism. So it goes inside the liver, most of it gets metabolized then and there, because metabolism, liver plays a very important critical role in the metabolism of the drug. So in the distribution, what you need to look at is, again, the release plays very critical role, because if the drug is kind of highly protein bound, if the drug gets accumulated into the fat tissues, then it is expected to achieve a longer duration of action, and therefore your release can affect very significantly. Also, the distribution plays very important role when you're looking at targeted delivery of the of any of the drug to prevent the metabolic challenges, or you're looking at avoiding the first pass metabolism through the liver. So that's why release, again, for a formulation scientist, that's the very critical role as a formulation scientist. When you're designing a new drug, you're always looking at the pharmacokinetics or pharmacodynamics of the drug, and you're releasing the drug accordingly. Metabolism, which basically means that, converting chemically any compound which is then easier for elimination. So more soluble compounds are produced, and then which are easier for elimination. So the body doesn't want any foreign material remaining inside. So once it is exposed to that, it breaks it down and eliminates. And then comes the excretion process, because whatever metabolites are generated, even the drug doesn't undergo any kind of metabolism, the drug has to be excreted out of the body. So it can get excreted in form of unchanged drug, or it can get excreted in form of metabolite via renal, fecal, pulmonary. There are a lot of different sweat, different routes by which it can get eliminated. So this is normally for a formulation scientist, if you know these four things, it becomes four things, then you can have the release of the drug properly designed so that you can overcome a lot of challenges that any metabolic process per se has on the efficacy or effectiveness of the drug. So what are the when you're looking at bioavailability, you're looking at basically four challenges in the oral bioavailability of the drug. You're looking at solubility. Solubility means you have different hydrophilic, lipophilic balance value for the product, HLB values, you have water solubility, which leads to the dissolution of the drug in the GI tract. And also certain drugs have a tendency to precipitate in either the acidic environment or in the basic environment because their pKa's are of such a nature that they tend to precipitate in stomach pH when it is highly acidic, or in the intestinal pH, which is towards basic in nature. So solubility plays very critical, important role in terms of achieving the oral bioavailability, and it is dependent on lots and lots of factors, which we are going to see later, but particle size, polymorphic form, the pKa of the drug, and what are the different solutions to manage those things, that also we'll see in the presentation as we move ahead. Then it comes down to chemical stability of the product. So products like proton pump inhibitors or duloxetine, like drugs which gets decomposed or which undergo degradation in stomach pH. So pH stability is also very important factor. And then a lot of peptides which we cannot orally administer because of a lot of different challenges, but one of the major challenges over there is enzymatic degradation over there, because you have a lot of peptidases, pepsine and trypsin, all those enzymes which break down the protein, they break down those drugs also, the peptide drugs or vaccines also. Therefore, you cannot give them through the oral route, and you need to incorporate certain agents into it to withstand that enzymatic degradation. We'll see that later. But chemical stability of the drug plays very important role, and it is one of the major challenges that a pharmaceutical scientist would always face when he is designing a new or a generic drug formulation. Permeability, it's a passive kind of transport or active transport. The passive transport will depend upon the log-P, it will depend upon the size of the drug or the molecule per se. That's the reason why many of the peptides, vaccines are not absorbed orally. You have a lot of different metals which don't get absorbed through passive transport, which are large in size. But for them, there is an active transport, like for example, vitamin B12, very large molecule, but gets absorbed because there is a active transporter available in the GI tract, which based on the influx and efflux mechanism allows the B12 to get absorbed. So larger molecule do also get absorbed, and that's where most of the research on the protein chemistry or most of the research on oral peptide delivery is getting concentrated now onto improving the permeability through targeting these active sites. Even the iron gets absorbed through active transport. And that's the reason why we see a lot of anemic patients, even though they're taking very high content of iron, it is not a good solution. And what is the solution? We will talk about it, how to improve the permeability. We'll talk about it. And of course, the metabolism, because once you achieve all the above three and the drug is available in the body, the biggest challenge is its metabolism, because the drug is actually going to get broken down. The AUC inside the body for the drug will be dependent highly, area under the curve, or the availability of the drug for a long period of time to elicit its pharmaceutical effect or pharmacological action will depend upon the metabolism. Now, this metabolism can be pre-systemic. Pre-systemic means before reaching the blood circulation. That is through the first pass liver metabolism, or inside the GI tract, where a lot of bacteria or flora, fauna do the breaking down of the drug, can act on the drug, can decompose or can break down the drug into smaller fragments, or can metabolize the drug inside the GI tract, or it can be during the transport of the drug across the lumen of the GI tract or gut of the GI tract or the epithelial cells. There is some kind of metabolism taking place, because there are a lot of esterases, there are a lot of enzymes which are present over there. Or it can actually get into the systemic circulation, and then it can break down the drug into its metabolites. So there are various challenges that are there in this oral bioavailability. We will see one by one each of them. I hope so far I am clear. So if you have any doubts, please raise your hand, or please put it across so that I can understand that I am going at the right pace and I'm not too much fast or I'm not too much slow. So let me know that by just raising your voice. Should we move ahead?
Yes, Dr.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Your pace is appropriate.
Yeah.
Dr. Dipti, can you just announce how it is?
The participants can post the questions in the chat box or even on the WhatsApp group. We will be taking the questions, if preferably, towards the end of the session, if that is okay with sir.
Yeah.
All right.
If there is any, there is confusion in terms of understanding, then we can take it up then and there. I don't have any issues on that. We have a lot of time. We have 2 hours, so
Correct. The participants can raise hand and we'll address to the queries. We can provide mic as needed. Thank you.
Okay. So metabolism, basically, it is the biochemical modification of one chemical form to another, occurring usually through the specialized enzymatic systems. So basically, if you look at it, it is related to the conversion of these lipophilic chemical compounds into highly polar derivatives that can easily be excreted from the body. So you have glucuronides, which glucuronidase enzymes are there. So they kind of, if there is a hydroxy or amino or some kind of a polar group available, they put the glucuronide group over there, and it gets conjugated with glucuronides, or it forms a glucuronide, and then it becomes very soluble, so it can get excreted from the sweat or from urine. Or if that is possible, it can get excreted back into the intestine and then excreted as such as a metabolite into the feces. Over So when we tried to analyze all these drugs which have been approved, and there are millions and millions of drug approved, almost I can say that 95% of the excretion route preferred or designed by the medicinal chemist is through the kidney. So that's where, and it's not formulation scientists can't do much about it. It's the job of a medicinal chemist because they are the ones who are designing the drugs. So the drug design itself involves how the drug can be broken down into different metabolites. And once in a while, or almost 30% of the cases, when you can't actually predict the metabolites before it becomes a drug, then in that case, what happens is, you try to then through the formulation delivery, you optimize its excretion characteristics. But the basic function of metabolism is to break down the drug into easily soluble derivatives so that they can be excreted from the body comfortably. Now, if you see in history of almost 100 odd years or more than that of drug discovery, and of late 50 years of very highly targeted drug delivery in terms of structure activity relationships, and a lot of molecular modeling has gone in, a lot of drug designing has gone in over the last 50 years. Metabolism is one of the key drivers for knocking off the drug, potential drug candidate or discovery compound to become a drug. And that's where the whole challenges start. You can design a drug, you can have it absorbed properly, and then you can maintain the permeability. You can do all that modeling. But after that, when it comes to the fate of the drug actually inside the body, the drug has a very high rate of metabolism, or it has a metabolite which are very active or toxic, or could be more potent than the actual drug, or it may not get metabolized at all, or it may not get absorbed at all, or there are so many first pass effect, can get excreted back into the intestine without reaching the blood circulation. So there are a lot of challenges in the metabolism, and this is one of the 99% of the cases when a potential discovery compound could not become a drug. It's only because of its metabolism. So the reason for that is very good, potent in vitro activity, but fails to reach the site of action in the in vivo setup. Or solubility, chemical stability, permeability can be optimized by different approaches. Actually, metabolic challenges are very difficult to handle only through formulation technology. It's mostly involves the breaking down of the compound, so therefore the chemical structure is very critical. So it has a lot of role has been played by the medicinal chemist and the biomedical scientists who actually design the drug. They should play more role in overcoming all these metabolic challenges. But unfortunately, for a formulation scientist, once you've been given a drug candidate, what we can do to maximize the potential of that candidate and overcome the challenges that are there in the metabolism, that we are going to look for now. So what are the different metabolic sites, predominant sites for metabolism? Those are intestinal, lumen, gut wall, and liver. And the arrow indicates the severity, where it happens most. So liver is the maximum predominant site for any metabolism. There are a lot of cytochromes, there are a lot of glucuronidase, enzymes which are present in the liver, which actually metabolizes the drug very fast. Very few drugs get metabolized in the gut wall, where you have those esterases and microbes and funguses that are present. They metabolize the drug, and very few drugs get metabolized actually in the intestinal lumen during the epithelial cell transport. And that's where 20% of the medicinal chemistry work is actually happening at the intestinal lumen level. We'll talk about it now. So the biggest culprit, I would say, for a formulation scientist when he is facing a metabolic challenge is the liver. Actually the liver. And the biggest advantage that a medicinal chemist has in terms of reducing the metabolism is the liver and the lumen, actually. So for a formulation scientist, something which is a problem, it's an actual opportunity for a medicinal chemist to design a good drug candidate. So when we are looking at different approaches to overcome the metabolic challenges or challenges that a formulation scientist is facing in the metabolism of any drug, is a target approach that you have to see. You have to see where is the site of metabolism. Is it the lumen? Is it the gut wall? Is it the liver? And how you are going to design your formulation technology to bypass that particular site of metabolism, or how you can improve the rate of metabolism or reduce or increase the rate of metabolism by having the right approach. Then the type of metabolism. Type of metabolism in a sense that whether it is the esterases, whether it is the cytochrome, whether it is undergoing a glucuronidation, or what kind of metabolism is happening to the drug, how it is getting broken down, how fast it is getting broken down, can it be reduced, can it be, can the blood level still be maintained by reducing the release? So how release of the drug from your dosage form, can it play an important role? And the rate of metabolism. So if it is fast rate of metabolism, you can slow down the release so that always some drug is available throughout for absorption, and therefore that much only will get released. Something like osmotic delivery systems, wherein you have very reduced thrust and trips for the absorption. And then there are other factors also, which actually we'll talk first, that is absorption. How to improve the absorption of the drug, because if it is not absorbed, then it will not be metabolized. If it is not distributed properly, if there is a very high protein binding, if there is a very high fat deposition, then the metabolism is going to get affected, surely, and the half-life of the drug is going to get longer. So how you are going to address those issues of longer half-life or longer duration of action, whether it is causing any side effects, whether it is desired, not desired, everything will depend upon all those aspects. And excretion, again, when it comes down to, if you know that the excretion is happening in the urine, through the urine, how you can control the excretion of the drug so that it is not eliminated fast and can remain in the body for a longer period of time, or how it can be eliminated fast also in case you want a faster elimination. If it is a biliary excretion is there, which is, then how you can modify that excretion rate. If it is a fecal which means it is not getting absorbed or having a first pass, or it is getting re-excreted into the intestine, then you need a very different kind of formulation strategy. So the release, so the metabolic challenges through formulation technology per se can have some kind of, you can design some kind of strategy which belongs to one of the following criterias. Now, when you're looking at a particular molecule, those strategies may work for a certain class of compounds, may not work for certain other class of compounds, but then you have to have a balance of 2 or 3 different strategies in order to have multiple effect in terms of overcoming challenges. So may not be the one solution will fit for all such type of issues, but you may have to combine 2 or 3 different solutions and then check whether it is working or not. So if you are looking at target approach, I mean specific kind of site of metabolism, type of metabolism, rate of metabolism, majoritarily the solutions are available in the medicinal chemistry. So drug designing will provide you fantastic approaches. For site of metabolism, if you are looking at, glucuronidation or cytochrome P450, design the drug in such a way, have the substituents or have its structure which does not offer any glucuronidation chance. Or if you want a faster elimination, introduce more polar groups which can undergo glucuronidation, or which can have introduce something which undergoes oxidation, so the cytochromes come into play very effectively over there. Or you can have amide groups which can be broken down through the esterases or through amidases, or can introduce some kind of peptide groups which undergo peptidase breaking, and you can modify the metabolism. Combination approaches are also successful over here, and we will talk examples about it in the subsequent slides, how the site of metabolism, type of metabolism, and rate of metabolism, you can combine a drug with another active ingredient and can have a very different, and you have completely overcome the metabolic challenges that are there for that particular drug, active ingredient. Some formulation approaches are effective, but not entirely a formulation approach will be useful at 100% level. So, but formulation approaches are also available if you are looking at challenges that are faced at the site, type, and rate of metabolism. If you're looking at absorption as a factor, then which is causing the challenge in terms of metabolic processes, then formulation is the approach. Medicinal chemist is not required. You're very confident in terms of improving the solubility, but for permeability, very limited formulation approaches. Again, medicinal chemistry is the best approach for that. You, as a formulation scientist, you have no control over protein binding and fat deposition. So the distribution of the drug, hardly there is any formulation approach unless you are releasing, retarding, fast tracking the rate, release rate. So only release control is in your hand, but otherwise distribution control is purely a medicinal chemistry approach. Excretion, you have several approaches. Again, in excretion, you have formulation approach. Fantastic. You can design a very good strategy for controlling the rate. Control means both. You can fast track, you can retard the rate of excretion through formulation technology. So when we are talking about formulation, I think this discussion, what we are having today, is only majoritarily, I would focus 90% on the formulation approaches, and I won't focus much on the medicinal chemistry approaches right now, because I believe medicinal chemistry, Dr. Digani is going to talk about it, which is, and she's an expert into that. So she'll talk more about it in her talk. So before we move to, I hope everybody is aware about this BCS classification, and also there is something called as BDDCS, which is Biopharmaceutics Drug Disposition and Classification System. So these are two different class of this thing, although they are kind of overlapping with each other, but their terminology is a little different. So BCS is basically biopharmaceutics classification. We have BCS class 1 drug, which are highly soluble, and they also have excellent penetration across the GI tract. So it is more than 90% they are absorbed in through the GI tract. And over there, actually, you don't need much of a formulation expertise over there, unless you want to alter the release, make it long acting, make it less eliminated over a period, because the elimination is also more than 70% over there. So you're looking at mostly 70% of metabolism. You are looking at BDDCS for BCS class 1. For BCS class 2, which are less soluble, but it has a good permeability. So those are BCS class 2. BCS class 1 is basically all your products like venlafaxine, hydrochloride, pregabalin, divalproex. All these are basically class 1 molecules, doxazosin. So all these are class 1 molecules, highly soluble, highly permeable. BCS class 2 are notorious molecules for formulation scientists. That's where the formulation scientist tends to spend maximum time developing a product like carbamazepine, oxcarbazepine. You have products like which are highly insoluble products, like you have so many products are there. We'll see the class of those products and what are the technologies that one can use. But the advantage is, once you make them soluble, it is predictable. It has a predictable behavior because the permeability is not an issue. So a lot of formulation technologies have been developed to enhance the solubility of the drug and make the BCS class 2 drugs more bioavailable. So a lot of work has happened actually on this BCS class 2 drugs in terms of formulation strategies. Same time, they are highly BDDCS class 2 also. So the metabolism plays very critical role. 70% of the metabolism, they undergo more than 70% of metabolism. So that's where the challenges also are much more. BCS class 3 is basically, it has a good solubility, but has less permeability. Molecule like metformin, which has excellent solubility, but is not permeable through the GI tract. Different technologies are applicable over here. You can't use the BCS class 2 technologies of particle size or polymorphic strategies can't be used over here. You have to use certain release control mechanisms because not to saturate the site of absorption. And again, for all these drugs, the site of absorption might vary very significantly. So even if it is a BCS class 1 molecule, it might not get absorbed in the upper part of intestine, for example, or it might get 100% absorbed through the upper part of intestine. So you need to have, in order to improve its absorption, you need to have some mechanism wherein the drug is made available in the upper part of intestine, and not the tablet, if it passes into the lower part of intestine, then the drug is not going to get absorbed because it has no absorption in the, so you have to release the maximum drug in the upper part of intestine. And if it is a rate controlling mechanism is there in terms of absorption, then you need to modify the release in order to maximize the absorption. So there are a lot of things, underlying factors also, when you are actually trying to improve or overcome the metabolic challenges. And then BCS class 4, again, the some technologies of class 2, product like chlorthalidone, BCS class 4 product, very low soluble, very less bioavailable, brizofulvin and other products which are class 4 products. There is no permeability. Now, if you want to improve their permeability, you are looking at different challenges, different technologies. And again, in terms of BDD CS classification, you are looking at renal and biliary excretion of more than 70% over there. So metabolism does not play critical role for BDD CS 3 and 4 categories, but the elimination plays very critical role, because biliary elimination plays very significant role in first pass metabolism and recirculation of the drug in the GI tract. One of the important approaches that is being used for overcoming metabolic challenges is the prodrug approach. And this is a medicinal chemistry approach. This is the only thing which is, apart from formulation I am talking over here, it is the prodrug approach. So basically a prodrug, we all know that prodrug is actually an inactive compound, but in vitro it is inactive, but once it gets into the in vivo system, whether during its presence in the GI tract, whether it is the transport across the GI tract, or once it gets into the bloodstream, it gets converted into its active compound through a chemical or enzymatic transformation. And we have numerous examples of prodrug approach, which we will talk later. But why this approach is, it's basically prodrug approach is used if the absorption of the drug is an issue. So a lot of compounds that are not soluble in water, or they are soluble but they are not permeable, for those compounds, a prodrug approach normally works. Or certain compounds, when are absorbed, are eliminated at a fast rate. So prodrug gets absorbed over a period of time, gets converted into its active metabolite, active compound, and then shows its efficacy. So prodrug is the most successful used approach when it comes to improve the oral delivery of the drug or improve the bioavailability of poorly absorbed drugs. Can give you some statistical number wherein between 2000 to 2012, almost about 20% of the new molecules that were approved by US FDA as NCE, new chemical entities, were prodrugs. And they resolved a lot of issues that were related to the original drug. And that led to quite, so this approach is the best used approach if you are looking at poorly absorbed drug. If you are looking at highly, polar drugs which don't get absorbed through the GI tract, there is a permeability issue, there is an absorption issue. So those can be converted into a prodrug. It's not an easy approach, but it's a very successful approach that over the years medicinal chemists have adopted. And they always take the feedback from the formulation scientists, because formulation scientists can tell them that, look, we are facing a dead wall over here because this drug is not soluble. Can you do something? So they then get into this prodrug approach. And it improves the undesirable properties of the active compound also. And we will see that. And it improves the entire pharmacokinetic profile of the drug. Prodrug may also, kind of improve the tissue distribution. It can improve the efficacy and toxicity of the parent drug, as well as selectivity for the intended target. And we'll see examples of that in the subsequent slides. So they are classified into two categories, the prodrugs. One is which are converted intracellularly, and those which are converted extracellularly. Okay, so intracellularly means once it gets into the epithelial cells and the GI tract. Once it crosses the GI tract, after that, if it gets converted, it's called as intracellular. If it is before the GI tract, especially in the digestive fluids or in the systemic circulation, if it gets, then it is called as extracellular. Because in the bloodstream, you have a lot of different enzymes. Also in the digestive fluid, you have different enzymes. So these enzymes and the chemicals play an important role in breaking down of a prodrug into active compound. Even the hydrochloric acid that is present in the stomach can play an important role in converting a prodrug to active moiety. Intracellular, there are lots and lots of esterases, there are phosphatases, you name it. So they kind of kick in over there and convert it into a active molecule. So we will see, so one of the best approach that is being used for prodrug is the phosphates, amino acid esters and amide moieties, introducing them on the molecule which improve the solubility. Because we know as you increase the polarity of the compound, it becomes much more soluble in the aqueous systems or the GI system. So therefore these phosphates, amino acid esters or amide moieties improve the solubility, and you have a lot of phosphatases, esterases, amidases, peptidases in the plasma or in other tissues, which can break them down once after the absorption or during the absorption. They can break them down into the active molecule. So first example is fosphenytoin. It's a phosphorylated derivative of phenytoin. Phenytoin, as we know, is for the treatment of epilepsy. Fosphenytoin is also for the treatment of epilepsy. So on the phenytoin, when they have introduced a phosphate moiety, it became fosphenytoin, and there is a 7,000-fold increase in the solubility. So immediately it became a highly absorbable drug compared to fosphenytoin. And in fact, fosphenytoin, unlike phenytoin, is a wonderful candidate. Even they have used it for injectable product. Phenytoin has a lot of challenges in development of an injectable formulation, but fosphenytoin, since highly soluble, it became a very good, successful injectable candidate as well, because you don't need oil or you don't need suspension. It's a painless injection of a simple solution. And then once it enters into the bloodstream, there are a lot of esterases, phosphatases in the blood, which break this down into phenytoin, which is the active molecule. Permeability. We talked about, permeability also. The prodrug can improve, not just the solubility, but the permeability also. And in solubility, you have so many examples. You have cefuroxime acetyl, you have cefpodoxime proxetyl, you have azilsartan medoximil. So all these are basically the prodrugs of the molecule, which actually improve the solubility of the drug. Permeability is oseltamivir and enalapril. Actually, the active compound, as we all know, is enalapril-lat, which is the diethyl ester, which is the diethyl ester compound. So on that enalapril-lat, there is a ethyl ester group is attached to convert it into its ethyl ester, which is enalapril. Similarly, oseltamivir is also an ethyl ester of the active compound. And once it gets through the oral absorption, when it is crossing the GI wall or inside the bloodstream, it gets converted into its active compound, which is the enalapril-lat. So that's a very, so permeability is also improved, enhanced using a prodrug approach. Reduce metabolic liability. So it can reduce the metabolism also. So for example, bambuterol, which is a derivative of terbutaline, which is actually used for treatment of asthma. So terbutaline has 2 hydroxy groups, and they undergo acetal formation in bambuterol. So bambuterol is nothing but acetal derivative of terbutaline, and therefore terbutaline bambuterol being less susceptible to the metabolism. Over a period of time, it gets converted into, very slowly it gets converted into terbutaline, which then starts showing its activity. So it remains in the bloodstream. Terbutaline levels remain in the bloodstream over a very long period of time. Selectivity for the intended target. I think this is also very critical, because it's one of the challenge in the metabolism also, that before it reaches the actual site of action, you have 5-fluorouracil easily gets broken down into the liver. So, and therefore, and it doesn't reaches the tumor cells directly. So they've converted into a compound called as capecitabine. Capecitabine first gets metabolized in the liver to generate a metabolite, which then gets into the tumor cells and gets broken down selectively into the tumor cells and gets broken down into 5-fluorouracil. So it is a double prodrug approach kind of a thing, but it is a fantastically designed. So hats off to these medicinal chemists who made these products possible for us formulation scientists to make it really work on a formulation aspects of these products. Lymphatic transport. Now, this is where the new research is getting targeted. For almost 7-8 years, people are working on lymphatic transport, because it was highly unexplored area, though very few products almost none is market available, which channelizes the lymphatic delivery. Very recently, couple of products have come, but this has been the target of the research scientist, and this is also very, very interesting lymphatic transport because it bypasses the liver, first pass metabolism. So this is a very, very important area in the next upcoming, I believe, 5-6 years. This is going to be dominating wherever there is a first pass liver, wherever we need to bypass the liver first pass metabolism, we can think of lymphatic delivery systems, which basically means that, prodrug with triglycerides or diglycerides or oily moieties, where the oil absorption is mainly through the lymphatic route. So along with that oil, if you put your drug as a complex product or as a oil, substituted oil, then we can have the absorption of drug through that lymphatic system, because along with oil, your drug is also going to get absorbed. So mycophenolic acid, it's a triglyceride prodrug, is being currently in the clinical trials. Mycophenolic acid, we all know, is an immunosuppressant, poorly absorbed, high first pass effect, so larger doses are required, which leads to the side effects. So hopefully this triglyceride prodrug should work something better because of bypassing the liver metabolism. L-DOPA, levodopa, diglyceride prodrug is being tried because levodopa is not normally absorbed very effectively from the GI tract, and also it has a lot of metabolic side effects. It has very fast excretion and fast metabolism. There are other approaches also for levodopa, which we will see, but any questions so far on the prodrug approach? So prodrug approach, it is a medicinal chemistry approach, and basically what it does is it actually gives you an advantage in terms of managing your overall absorption issues related to solubility, permeability, metabolic liability, target selection, and also the lymphatic transport. So prodrug approach is actually a very good tool available to a medicinal chemist to target what are the various metabolic challenges that a scientist might face. Combination drug approach is another approach that is being tried. We had seen that, if you are looking at a site specific, where is the site of metabolism, how the type of metabolism and the rate of metabolism. So there are a lot of enzyme inhibitors that are available in the literature also. So many of these enzyme inhibitors are combined with the active compound as a fixed dose combination. So FDC stands for fixed dose combination. So if the active compound is rapidly metabolized by certain enzymes inside the body, then that specific enzyme inhibitor can be added to this drug as a fixed dose combination, and the metabolism of that drug can be reduced or altered. The major challenge in this is the enzyme inhibitor that you're using or the other combination drug that you're using. It has to have a very less toxic profile. It should not be active on its own. It should not be interfering with the absorption of the main active. It should be compatible with the main active. It should not have side effects. These are the very critical things that one need to check, which anyways, in case of any fixed dose combination, we anyway check that. But these are the very critical things. But if you look at in the market, I think at least there are more than 100 such combinations. I have given some 4-5 examples, but more than 100 combinations are available wherein actually a combination drug is actually modifying the metabolic properties of the existing active. There is a possibility that when you are actually combining it with enzyme inhibitor, the dose of active ingredient can also be lowered, or it can be modified in a little different way, which can further prevent the toxicity which is there due to the higher doses of the active compound. And it can also alter the dosing frequency. So because as the higher level of active drugs concentration can be maintained in the body or in the blood, because it's not getting metabolized at a fast rate, so you can reduce the dosing frequency also. In those cases, the FDC can become kind of a modified release, or a extended release product as well. The first example over here is dextromethorphan, hydrobromide, and quinidine sulfate. Quinidine sulfate is a cytochrome P450 PD2 inhibitor, P2D6 inhibitor actually, and dextromethorphan undergoes rapid inactivation by that enzyme in the liver. So if you look at the actual dose of dextromethorphan, it is between 40 to 60 mg. In any of the tablets, it's 60 mg. It is 40 mg is also available, but it is the 60 mg which is thrice daily is the dextromethorphan dose for treatment of cough, cold, other things also. But here, what they have found is when they have put it with quinidine, the dose is actually reduced to 20 mg, along with 10 mg of quinidine sulfate. So you can see the marked difference, and this has opened another opportunity for dextromethorphan, because this is now tried. This drug is a combination is approved for the treatment of pseudobulbar effect, which is the sudden episodes of laughing and crying. So with reducing the metabolism of dextromethorphan, they could get one more disease targeted for dextro. So they improved the they improved the activity spectrum of dextromethorphan, because at 20 mg it does not have a good antitussive activity, which is required for your cough and cold, or it does not have the activity which is more towards pain management, but it has more activity towards suppressing the pseudobulbar effect or treatment of pseudobulbar effect, mood swings, modifying. So this is really something which, and quinidine has its own side effects. But if you look at the quinidine is used as an anti-arrhythmic agent, but if you look at the dose of quinidine over there, it's actually 20 and 40 mg, but this is 10 mg. So at 10 mg doses, it is just blocking the cytochrome P450 without causing any side effect like causing arrhythmias or QT wave prolongation or anything. So this is one of the major advantages, one of the best drugs that are available in the market, which actually addresses a combination to overcome a metabolic problem. Other drug is levodopa, carbidopa, and entacapone. Now here the active drug is only levodopa, Now, what carbidopa is doing and what entacapone is doing in that is levodopa gets rapidly inactivated once it gets absorbed by monoamine oxidases and also by catechol O-methyl transferase enzyme. So these two enzymes does not allow levodopa to remain inside the body over a long period of time. Immediately it gets metabolized. And we all know why we need DOPA, right? DOPA is one of the very critical autocoid that is available in our body, which is related to our moods, improvement, remembering everything, memory, all has got to do everything with DOPA. So the lack of levodopa will normally lead to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, this restless leg syndrome and all these activities, depression and lot of things. So carbidopa is an inhibitor of MAO. It's not a drug in itself. It just inhibits the monoamine oxidase enzyme. And entacapone is the inhibitor of catechol O-methyl transferase enzyme. So when you're blocking these two enzymes, actually, when you're giving carbidopa and entacapone along with levodopa, the levodopa inside the body increases and the dosing frequency has been reduced from 8 tablets of levodopa to about 4 tablets of levodopa. Now, levodopa and carbidopa is already also available in an extended release dosage form. With entacapone, the triple combination is only immediate release, but levodopa and carbidopa is available as an extended release product also. And that frequency is three times a day. And in that, again, the levodopa portion is more, the release is more controlled over carbidopa. Because carbidopa you want to release faster compared to the levodopa. Very interesting fixed dose combination of 3 or 2 different enzyme inhibitors along with one active. And these remaining 2, I think, amoxicillin with clavulanic acid. Actually, amoxicillin is, is the whole bacterial resistance for amoxicillin comes by the beta-lactamase enzymes, which are responsible for developing the resistance. So they break down the amoxicillin beta-lactamase enzymes, which are secreted by the bacteria. They actually break down amoxicillin, and therefore the resistance develops. So clavulanic acid is actually an inhibitor of beta-lactamase enzyme. And this enzyme inhibition actually leads to less resistance being developed towards amoxicillin because the beta-lactamases are blocked by this clavulanic acid. Same thing is for piperacillin and tazobactam. Now, there are n number of examples. You just hit enzyme inhibitor with an active ingredient. You will find many examples like this. I've just put 4 major examples over here. If you want to understand more, you can find that up from simple Google search also, or if you just get into a good library, you will find a lot of articles on that also. Now, both these approaches were not formulation driven approaches, that is the fixed dose. Also in fixed dose, you will have to do a lot of formulation modifications, or prodrugs, you have to do a lot of formulation technologies, but they were not really related to the formulation approach per se. Now, when you're looking at pure formulation approach, okay, so how you can so one of the most important lever that is there in formulation scientist hand is the release optimization. You have a lot of polymers, you can fast deliver, you can reduce the rate, And that's where majority of the metabolic challenges are taken care by the formulation scientist. Release can be altered. So, for example, I have put two examples over here. Zolpidem extended release formulation. Now, initially, when Zolpidem was approved way back in 2003-4, was under the brand name of Ambien, and it is for the treatment of sleep disorders, insomnia. So those patients who could not sleep take Ambien, and they get good sleep because it works in order to improve your sleep pattern. Now, Zolpidem has a half-life, short half-life, very short half-life, because it's metabolized fast through cytochrome, 3A4 enzyme. The IR tablet, the immediate release tablet, only provides about 4 to 6 hours of sleep. Now, compare that with the mixture of IR and ER product, which later on Sanofi came up with, is actually giving you, they just delayed the release for further 2 to 3 hours of the entire dosage form. So it was 5 and 10 earlier were approved. It became 7.5 and 12.5 are the extended release strengths. So the remaining portion, 40% is immediate release, 60% is extended release. So they just extended the release by 2 hours. So the profile is not 24 hours. It's just supposed to be taken at night, right? So you don't need throughout the day, you don't need Ambien. So you just need 9 hours of profile, sleep profile. So they just delayed it by 2 to 3 hours. So initial immediate release portion gave a good sleep for over 6 hours, and that later on 20%, 30% portion of extended release took it up to 9 hours. So this is very significant improvement that they did based on formulation technology for something which was a metabolic problem for the drug. Same thing happened with Memantine ER. Memantine we know used for treatment of Alzheimer's. So formulation provides only 16 hours of effect, the IR formulation. Now they just added a ER portion into it because Alzheimer's patient, to improve the patient compliance and that wearing off effect. So they call it as a wearing off effect. So after 16 hours, the Alzheimer patient starts getting these tics and restless leg syndrome and another issues. So to tackle this wearing off syndrome, they just added an extended release portion into the product, which improved the profile up to the 24 hours. So it is actually beads, coated beads into the capsule, which comprises IR and ER portions. So ER portion takes it up to 24 hours. And the same strategy is being used for Verapamil, which is Varalan PM, Propranolol ER, which is Enderal XL, Bupropion XL, which is Wellbutrin XL, Doxazosin. Again, it is questionable whether it is required or not, because Doxazosin itself has a 24-hour, very strong half-life. But what they have achieved in case of Doxazosin is, instead of for an IR formulation, it takes 12 days to reach the steady state. With an extended release, the steady state is reached in three days time. So that's an advantage with a Doxazosin extended release. Tamsulosin, again, treatment of benign prostate hypertrophy. It is just a 6-hour release profile they have improved. That's why giving completely a 24-hour release profile for class 1, BCS class 1 molecule, which is highly metabolized and highly absorbed also. Moving on to the next formulation approach, that's site of absorption. If you are looking at, then how you can do it. We talked about drugs like metformin, class 3 drug, pregabalin, class 1 drug. But these drugs are primarily absorbed from the upper part of intestine. Now, if you are designing a extended release product for memantine and for pregabalin, uh, and there is a gastric emptying happening, so within 2 hours or 3 hours, 2 hours after, or if you are under fed condition, within 4 hours, it will cross the stomach, get into upper part of intestine, and in next 3 to 4 hours, it is going to get into the lower part of intestine. And you're going to miss the absorption site for remaining almost 8 hours of your profile, or sorry, 16 hours of the profile you are going to miss, because there is no absorption site for the released drug in extended release dosage form. So what formulation scientists did is they made it into a gastroretentive, a larger tablet having more than 10 mm or 11 mm size, which will not pass through the pyloric sphincter, will remain in the stomach for a longer period of time, will release the drug in the stomach, and slowly it will get into the whatever the released drug upon gastric emptying will be continuously released into the intestine from upper part of intestine, where it will be absorbed over 24 hours. So this is one of the major challenge that the gastroretentive technologies actually, or mucoadhesive technologies, try to overcome from a metabolic process. Colon targeted, certain drugs which you need for specific, we talked about specific target into the colon because they locally act over there, or they are absorbed from there. So for those type of drugs, mesalamine, budesonide, which are used in case of Crohn's disease or inflammatory bowel syndrome, they are basically targeted through colon target delivery to improve their efficacy. If you release them in stomach and in intestine, either they cause side effects or they get metabolized. So, and there is no need for them to get released over there. So, why to improve the efficacy, they are specifically targeted for a colonic release. Liposomal. These are liposomes, as we all know, are basically phospholipids, so they are lipids, and therefore the lymphatic absorption of the drug, if you are targeting liposomal, is the best possible delivery route. And one of the major product that has come in, we'll talk about it a little while, but it's a octreotide oral capsule, octreotide, which is octapeptide. It was through the injectable route, but now they have made it into an oral product also through this kind of, I would say, lipidic liposomal technology. Lymphatic drug delivery, we talked about it. This is the third formulation approach. Lymphatic pathway can bypass the first pass liver mechanism, metabolism, and therefore improves metabolism and bioavailability. Co-administration with lipids, we talked about octreotide delayed release capsules. So in octreotide, is, as I said, is an octapeptide. It's not absorbed through oral route, but when they are giving it as a suspension in caprylate base in a capsule, which is then enteric coated. So enteric coating is done to prevent the GI degradation of peptide, because there are a lot of acids that are there, highly acidic. So peptides might undergo degradation over there. So to prevent degradation of octreotide, it is enterically coated. After that, it is, once it comes into the intestine, the caprylates that are there in it forms the oily mass in which octreotide remains suspended, and it kind of forms a semi-solid jelly, and then it is absorbed through the lymphatic route. completely. And caprylate also help in terms of reducing the interstitial or increasing the interstitial spaces for octreotide or a higher molecular size peptide to get absorbed also. And we'll see shortly more and more drugs coming into these platforms of lymphatic delivery, especially for peptides and vaccines, which you intend to deliver through the oral route. Formulation approach 4, which is for mostly for the injectable products, wherein orally you cannot have something which is for more than 1 day or 2 day, but in long acting injections, what actually you're doing is you're making it biodegradable. You're either getting them into a biodegradable polymer platform, you're creating microspheres, which are polylactide glycolic acid based, and there are n number of products that are available. Octreotide, which is called as a sandostatin depot, risperidone, the brand name is Risperdal Consta, exenatide, the brand name not Byetta, but give me a second. It's a long-acting exenatide depot is also available, which is in the PLGA microsphere base. Peptide, the particle size modification, you create a larger particle size. So they've converted into paliperidone palmitate, which is again a prodrug of paliperidone, and then made it into a higher size. So particle size optimization can actually, you get a 3-month depot also of paliperidone, a month depot of olanzapine, a 3-month depot of aripiprazole. So you just make one injection and just forget about it, because these patients are schizophrenic patients. They don't want medicines to be taken on a very regular basis. Another approach is oil-based injections, again to make it a long-acting. And now from all these, the drug is released very slowly over a period of time, and therefore the entire metabolic challenge that the drug is posing or the drug is having can be overtaken by just modifying the release. So this is a release modification for non-oral injectable product. Very simple approach of delaying the release, because some drugs, like we talked about proton pump inhibitors, duloxetine, valproex, a lot of these drugs get actually decomposed or degraded in the stomach, and they're not supposed to be delivered in the stomach. They need to be delivered in the intestine or in the stomach. They don't degrade, but they cause side effects like NSAIDs. They cause severe side effects. And therefore they must be released in the intestine. So they are enterically coated. So simple technology. The modification of this enteric coating technology is done to these prednisone MR tablets, modified release tablets, which are approved in US for treatment of rheumatoid arthritis. Now, if you look at the arthritic symptoms happen early in the morning. So the patient has to get up early in the morning, take the drug in order to prevent those, symptoms. But what this delayed release technology has done is the patient can take it at night when he is going to sleep. And the prednisone from this is released after 4 hours or 4.5 hours. So by morning time, when you're actually having the symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis, enough amount of prednisone is present in the bloodstream to take care of those symptoms. So this is how in fact, sometimes, I think that having a metabolic challenge is good, because the scientists start thinking in a very different, innovative way. Solubility improvement, there are, I think we know, n number of techniques like, particle size reduction, polymorph, changing the polymorph, converting it into amorphous form, spray drying, solid-solid dispersion, hot melting, lyophilization, cyclodextrin complexes, co-crystallization, all these are also very important approaches to improve the solubility and therefore directly affect the metabolism of a BCS class 2 drug. I think I'm on time. Yeah. So if you have any questions, please.
Hello. Thank you, Dr. Mandar, for such wonderful and informative session. Dr. Mandar, in his session, discussed about the how, as a formulation scientist, how the knowledge of ADME is important in dosage form development. He further emphasized on importance of physicochemical properties, chemical stability, permeability, and metabolism in the formulation development. He briefly touched upon what is metabolism and the sites of metabolism and highlighted metabolism challenges faced by the formulation scientist. He had also given the overview on BCS and PDDS classification of the drug. In various drug approaches, he outlined first the prodrug approach, in which drug metabolism of the drug can be altered either by altering the solubility, permeability, reduce metabolic liability, target selection, or improving lymphatic transport. The second approach which he has discussed is the combination drug approach, in which the enzyme inhibitors, they are combined with active drug compound as a fixed dose combination. He had cited various marketed formulations as an example wherein the combination drug approach has been used. The third approach is the formulation approach, which is based on where the metabolism of the drug has been altered. The various formulation-based approaches, like the drug is altered, like controlled drug delivery systems or sustained release systems, where the drug release is altered. Whereas from the site of absorption, where the drug can be drug release or metabolism of the drug can be altered, such as your gastroretentive systems, mucoadhesive systems, colon drug delivery systems, then lymphatic drug delivery systems, liposomal drug delivery systems. The co-administration of the drug with the lipids, long-acting injections, oil-based injections, modified or delayed release drug, their dosage forms, and solubility improvement approaches he has discussed, wherein the metabolism of the drug can be altered and bioavailability of the drug can be improved. Dr. Mandar, now we have few questions from the participants. Can we take those questions?
Sure.
Yeah. 1 minute. Let me see. Yeah. This is a question by Dr. Sebi. The prodrug approaches are highly interesting, but whether this approach is available in the market?
I think I talked about all those prodrug approaches, all those products except the prodrug which I talked later, last phase was the lymphatic delivery, was the only one which is not available in the market. Otherwise, you look at cefuroxime acetyl, even the dabigatran etexylate mesylate, which is approved product. So almost that's what I said. Between 2000 to 2008, if US FDA had approved, let's say year on year, about 220 new chemical compounds, of that 20% were the prodrugs that were approved. So those are in the market. So prodrugs are the most successful approach that is used for for addressing the metabolic challenges. That's the best and the most successful approach that is being used. And all those products are there in the market.
Okay. Now, this is a question from Shweta Mishra. She is asking that, sir, in case of multi-targeted drug, how the drug metabolism can affect the activity?
Multi-targeted means you're talking about multiple organ targeted, or
I think it is multiple organ.
Okay, so in many a times it's the formulation scientist cannot make it specifically targeted towards particular. As I said, the targeting can be done only in terms of absorption, or it can be done where the absorption site is for the formulation scientist, or how the release can be optimized. But in majority of the cases, the targeting of the release or targeting of the organ is the job of a medicinal chemist. So based on the distribution and the elimination characteristics, they design the drug to be targeted towards certain. Like for example, when we looked at a specific product like paliperidone, the palmitate was designed by the medicinal chemist, right? The formulation scientist only modified the particle size characteristics and its flow through the syringe system. Otherwise, everything was basically done by. But now with the liposomal system, there is a possibility that formulation scientists can also have some kind of control over the release of the target, or which specific targets you want to do.
Dr. Mandar, I have one question. This is regarding when we are going for various novel drug delivery systems like gastroretentive drug delivery systems or colon targeted drug delivery systems or liposomal. We are using novel excipients. So what is their fate or what is their effect on the efficacy of the formulation?
See, for all, basically, if it is you're talking basically about the inactive excipient. So the excipient has to be inactive. It has to have and it has to be as per the guidelines which are there, provided by the US FDA or by any regulatory agency, or normally those are given by the your regulatory norms. So there is an inactive ingredient database provided. So if they are novel, then you need to do all the toxicity studies, all the teratogenicity studies, you have to map the activity of that this thing over a long period of time, because the drug can be used in a specific quantity, but the excipient, if the dosing frequency, based on the dosing frequency, accumulation of the excipient inside the body, the excretion, whether it is absorbed, not absorbed, all those things have to be checked, and you have to have a drug master file for your excipient to be used in the formulation.
Now, does these excipients won't alter the metabolism of the drug?
If they alter, then actually why you're using those excipient, you want to alter the drug release, right? Otherwise those excipients are not useful, then the drug itself is good enough. So for example, if I want to release a particular drug in colon, I have to use certain colon-specific polymers, which only open up in the colon, right? So that is expected, and that's how I am doing this. But if it affects the drug activity, if it interferes with the drug activity, then that excipient is not useful. Or if that excipient has its own activity, say for example, if you're using a specific polymer which causes diuresis, then you don't need that excipient. That excipient is not at all advisable for using.
One more
So
question.
concentration is also, it's not just the excipient per se, but at what concentration you are using that excipient, that is also important.
One more question is that when we are designing these site-specific drug delivery systems, the alteration in the your mucosal alteration because of the disease condition, will it be taken into consideration? Now, say in Crohn's disease or say any ulcers in stomach. So in case of gastroretentive delivery systems or colon targeted delivery systems in Crohn's disease, where there are mucosal alterations.
Yeah.
So in that case, how do you go for any efficacious drug delivery system?
So basically, if you're doing something, in silico,
Okay.
then if you're doing in silico modeling of release pattern and release profile, then you need to select the right in silico cells. But if you're looking at actual in vivo performance, then there is nothing better than actually doing a kind of bioequivalence or bioavailability or a clinical trial on the patients itself. So if you look at the guideline which is there for colonic release, I think 90% of the products you will find that you're not supposed to use the healthy volunteers. But now the guidelines have also changed. Now they are recommending to use the healthy volunteers for product like mesalamine and even for budesonide. And you will find it very difficult to match the release in a very normal, healthy human volunteer, because the drugs themselves are very variable. The mucosa, as you rightly said, has an impact on the absorption of the drug. So what I can tell you from my own experience is we did almost about, when I was in my previous organizations, we failed almost about 3, 4, 5, 6 bio studies for mesalamine, 1.2 gram product, and then in India, in Europe. But when we did that study in Canada at 3 times the cost, with certain specific with certain specific population of people, healthy volunteers, that study passed.
Okay.
So it requires a certain type of mucosa definitely for passing, and you can only do in silico. It is possible to evaluate, model it.
Okay.
But I don't think many of us, like we also don't have in silico access to such a high, technology. Very few universities and research labs have that kind of understanding about. Otherwise, you can do what you can best do is type 4 study also, you can think of doing it.
Okay. Dr. Mandar, we have another question from Dr. Harita. She's asking, what are the considerations while selecting drug molecules for repurposing?
This is a different topic, but anyways, so criteria for repurposing is basically you have fourfold criteria. One is you're looking at the basic mechanism by which the drug acts. Okay, so the basic mechanism, what I mean is the molecular level of mechanism, which receptor, which enzyme, which protein that particular drug is being targeted. For example, when you, recent example, if you're looking at this baritinib or ponatinib, which are now targeted for COVID also, are basically kinase inhibitor, protein kinase inhibitors. So they inhibit the protein kinases and thereby, and why in protein kinases, if you look at tumor cells, so they have very high concentration of protein kinases, so they get over there, inactivate those cells which are, you know, highly tumoric cells, or which are having large amount of hypoxic cells. So they go over there and they inhibit them. What scientists also found out is that that same kind of kinase activity is there within the COVID virus also. So knowing, or for example, if you look at the recent molecule which DRDO has come up along with Dr. Reddy's, is that, 2-deoxyglucose. Now that was again an anti-cancer onco compound which was tried as a, sugar mimetic or glucose mimetic for treatment of cancer. So cancer cells which require more sugar. So this product preferably will get absorbed into those cells wherein they will sort of and it will undergo phosphorylation, but it won't undergo glycosylation. So the cell will die. So, and the scientists also found that a COVID virus also has the same kind of phenomena. When a hypoxic cell which has virus requires more sugar, right? So 2-deoxyglucose gets absorbed over there, gets phosphorylated, but doesn't get glycosylated, and therefore the cell dies. So the viral cells die, which is the repurpose mechanism. Now, if you look at some of the other repurposing that is being done is for favipiravir or for remdesivir, which were developed for as a reverse transcriptase inhibitor for influenza virus. Now, influenza is again a type of a SARS virus, and therefore it makes sense because the basic mechanism at the grassroots level is same. So why not try this? On the other hand, if you see why scientists tried different compounds, is not because of the basic mechanism of action, but the site of action. So if something acts in the lungs and is actually improving the airflow and airways, then can that be used for as a adjunct therapy, not as a main therapy to actually kill the COVID virus, but actually to improve the lung function. So that's also is another way of looking at it. So you will find that even guaifenesin along with some other compounds have been used for improvement in the COVID situation. So repurposing has several aspects, and why somebody would do certain this thing will depend on A, the basic mechanism of action, B, the site of action, 3 is the pharmacokinetic profile. I mean, if that helps in terms of alleviating some of the symptoms, or if something can be given in conjunction with something, then that helps. So there is no specific repurposing this thing, but these are some of the criterias based on which repurposing is being done.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mandar. Let me just read out certain comments of our participants. Here, Dr. Sunil Reddy, he said that Nutrijids are more efficient for colon-targeted drug delivery system for class 4 drug. Then many of the participants, they have said that the talk was very nice, very informative. Thank you. And another, there are many comments on that about the informative section is that. So I think I thank Dr. Mandar for taking out your precious time and discussing various approaches with us and with our participants. Thank you very much. On the behalf of
Thanks.
College of Pharmacy as well as on the behalf of participants, I extend my thanks.
Yeah, and my email ID and phone number is always already there. So if you have any questions, you can directly write to me.
Yes.
And I will be very happy to answer. Thanks again, everyone, for your patient listening. Thanks for wonderful comments, some brilliant questions. They help me also to understand more about all these aspects. I also did a lot of research over last couple of days or last week. And it enriched my knowledge also. So I must thank Bombay College of Pharmacy, Dr. Vaishali Shirsat, and the entire managing committee of this FDP and all the participants. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir, for joining with us today. And thank you, Dr. Ujjwala Shinde, for chairing the session. May I now request Dr. Vaishali Shirsat to conclude the session. Vaishali ma'am, you're not audible.
Dr. Mandar, you were really very good. The session was very nice. And I think you will make a good teacher because you were very, very, have you understood and, gone right from basics onwards. So.
I was, in fact,
and very informative sessions.
Yeah, I was a teacher, in fact, in Bombay College of Pharmacy itself during my employment PhD. And but yeah, I have tremendous respect for the teachers. Unfortunately, I don't have the kind of patience and the tenacity that you have to be a teacher. I could have been, but I know I'm not a good teacher. Thanks for that.
No. The concern, that everybody has understood. Okay, you finished with prodrugs. Do you have a question on that? That shows that that's the teachers not just delivering, but also seeing that the learner has understood. Thank you. I think now Dr. Vaishali is audible.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Dr. Mandar. It was indeed a pleasure to have you with us in this FDP program. You took us through the various approaches with respect to the formulations that can alter the drug metabolism. So thank you for actually sharing your ideas, knowledge with respect to the various formulation approaches. And in acknowledgement of this, we have planted a sapling on your behalf, which has been done by our students, so that you will always it will always remind of your contribution for this FDP. So I request now Sagar and Mrinal to please play the video for it. Yes. So I think it's the bale sapling which has been planted.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Dr. Vaishali, and indeed my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me for this. Thanks a lot. That was a wonderful gesture. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mandar. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Dr. Dipti, can you announce the schedule?
Yes, ma'am. So with this, we end the day one schedule. Thank you very much to all for joining with us today. We will now meet tomorrow. That is the day 2 of the schedule of our faculty development program, and the schedule will begin at 9:30 sharp. The registration will start at 9 o'clock. So please join with us by around 9:15 a.m. so that we are on schedule. That is the session 4 that will begin from 9:30 a.m. onwards. The detailed schedule will be sent to all the participants on the WhatsApp group, as well as it will be emailed. Please note that the link for connecting for the meeting is the same. We still be sending the email with the link so that there is no hassle in joining the meeting. In case anyone has any issue with joining the meeting link, please email us so that we can sort out the issues therein. The feedback for the day one link has already been shared in the chat box. It will also be sent on the WhatsApp group. Please fill the feedback form, as it is already mentioned to you all that it is mandatory for all the sessions that the feedback forms are to be filled. Thank you very much. Have a very good day and a good evening. Thank you and bye.
Thank you. Thank you all. So we officially now close the session of the day.